Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our webinar so that you can learn more about Dr. Sonya Kallenberg, our new Executive Director for Gorilla Doctors. I'm Dr. Jan Raymer, and I have the honor of being the current chairman of the Board of Directors of Gorilla Doctors. I'm also a senior vice president of animal care and conservation at the Columbus Zoo. And the Columbus Zoo is an organization that has been supporting gorilla doctors for over 30 years. What serendipity that I got to work with gorilla doctors and then with Columbus Zoo for these last 11 years. I have been with Gorilla Doctors since 2009. I was the regional manager, and during that time, the 4 years that I held that position, I had the privilege of working with some of the most dedicated, brave, and impactful teams in DR Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. It was truly a transformative time of my career. And during that time, I got to meet and work with Dr. Sonya. And as she grew Grace, but also as we helped move the orphan gorillas to their new home. Before we get started with Dr. Sonya, just a quick reminder to everybody on the call that we will have a question and answer opportunity at the end of the program. And you'll see the opportunity to write your questions on the Zoom screen. And when you do that, please be sure to say who you are and where you're from. And then we can answer those questions at the end. So take it away, Sonya.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for coming. So today marks my 1 month anniversary of starting as executive director for Gorilla Doctors. And it's been a whirlwind of a month, super exciting, and just so amazing to get to know the team, the board of directors, and to learn more about our programs that are happening across Rwanda, DR Congo, and Uganda. A really exciting time, exciting month, and ready for more.
Excellent. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Sonia and I got to work together with Grace in the early years. So 2009, 10, 11, 12, up through 15 when I came here. Um, so many adventures. And one of the ones that comes to mind, Sonia, is, and the picture in the video reminded me of that. Do you remember when we were flying in, and I don't remember which orphan it was, but the UN helicopter landed in the wrong spot, and you guys had to scramble to figure out where we were. Which gorilla was that?
That was Ihirwe, who was being
That's
cared for at the
right.
time in Rwanda by Gorilla Doctors. And then when she moved over to Congo in that move and then became a resident at Grace, she was renamed Muyisa because
That's
they
right.
wanted to give her a Congolese name. So yes, that was crazy. And Dr. Natalie, who was a veterinary advisor for Grace at the time, we were waiting for the helicopter to land, and you and Dr. Eddie were in the helicopter. We had a whole spot prepared of where the helicopter should land, and at the last minute they couldn't land there, and then we had to scramble and race down the mountain to meet you down in the village or somewhere where we ended up
Yeah, I
landing.
think it was a soccer field or something where they
Yes.
found. Yeah, that was, oh my
Never
God.
a dull moment.
Never, ever. So many stories. I thought maybe what we could start is back at the very beginning. I know some of you have been reading the blog series on Dr. Sonya, and and you've seen some of the already questions and answers with her, and so you've had a bit of an introduction to her background. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the things that were early in your career, Sonya.
Yeah, so I guess it started growing up on a farm in Ohio. So Jan, you're in Ohio now. That's where I'm from. And like a lot of farm kids, I was in a 4-H club, and that meant I took care of a variety of animals. And so just loved animals ever since I was a kid and thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. Went to college to study to head down that track. And when I got to college, just became enthralled with animal behavior and had my first opportunities to do some field work. And that took me in that direction. And that's where I ended up.
Oh, that's great. You know, funny, there are some parallels in our careers. When I went to college, I wanted to be a veterinarian too. But then I took an ethology class, an animal behavior class, and I dropped that major the first semester of my freshman year of college and ended up doing animal behavior, and which led me to my jobs in zoos. But eventually I did go back to vet school and become a veterinarian, which then led me to gorilla doctors, which was pretty great. But it's kind of funny that we both had that inclination because we both loved animals so much.
Well, and it's actually pretty special that I'm at Gorilla Doctors now because maybe there's a little part of that kid in me who wanted to be a vet who now I get to contribute to the veterinary work of Gorilla Doctors. So that's super fun.
I love it. Um, so I love that you worked in Borneo and you studying orangutans when you were very young. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Was that the first time you ever left the United States?
It was. I decided not to go to Canada or Mexico first. I went to Borneo. So I dream big. But yeah, no, I became fascinated with great apes when I was, I don't know, probably middle school. And I think a lot of people who end up in primatology or conservation or are interested in conservation, their first introduction to great apes is really through the work of Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, Baruti Galdikas, who are sometimes called the trimates. You know, they did the pioneering work studying wild chimpanzees, mountain gorillas, and orangutans. So I learned about their work early on and read all the books and got interested in great apes. And I wanted to take it beyond just reading. And so I started volunteering at my local zoo. And I worked with the keepers who were caring for the great apes. And you know, I couldn't do much because I wasn't very, you know, I was young. But they gave me the job of developing enrichment for the chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans that I was working with. And what that means is things like feeding puzzles and stuff to keep them occupied because they're super intelligent. Um, and while I was doing that work, Barute Galdikas, who was the, you know, at the time the world's expert on orangutans, she visited the zoo and came behind the scenes, and I got to meet her. And in that meeting, she said, "Well, you should come to Borneo." And you know, we have a lot of infant orphans coming in because at the time there was a real uptick in deforestation in Borneo, and so a lot of orphans were coming out of the forest, and it was super difficult time. And so she said, "We need help." And I, of course, wanted to do this, but then had no money to do it. So I worked with one of my professors who helped me learn how to write grants. And so that got me closer to my goal, but not quite there. And so this was my first experience with real fundraising. So I still had a gap I had to close. And so I guess it was pretty cheeky of me, but I was determined and I made an appointment with the provost of my university and asked to meet with him and wanted to make a pitch to see if he would support me to get me to Borneo to do that work. And that was before PowerPoint. And so I remember I brought like a stack of National Geographics and I had them like spread out in his office and was showing him sort of, you know, the orangutan work that Dr. Galdikas had done. And he ended up supporting me. And so that was my first time fundraising. But yeah, that was as you can imagine, a transformative experience, you know, going from the farm to out of the country to Borneo and then working with orangutans and seeing the orphans coming in. I mean, a lot of them had serious injuries, they were malnourished, in need of significant care. It also just sort of opened my eyes to the problems in conservation and like, you know, what great apes are facing. And so that was the beginning of it all, really, for me.
Wow. Yeah, it just incredible the experiences that you can have in life that just stick with you forever and turn your career the direction that you know it needs to go. And I was also interested to read in your blog that you also some of your earliest research was with birds. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so birds is what drew me into the field of research. So my first year in college, I joined a bigger project within the zoology department that was looking at the evolution of molting in birds, so how birds molt. And so I was more of a helper than a researcher. I was just, you know, young and eager. But through that project, I learned how to misnet wild songbirds and help the team sort of sample the birds for bacteria and working with the scanning electron microscope to look at bacteria under that. And yeah, so it was a great experience. And I still love birds, and birds are still a big part of my life. I'm a big birder, and I bird with my kids and husband. And And actually, I try to stay involved with bird conservation as much as I can too. I actually work with my local Audubon here on a project that works to pass policy statewide to try to reduce the risk of bird window collisions within the state. So working with local businesses and homeowners to have their windows retrofitted to make them safer for birds because glass is one of the leading causes of death for migrating birds. So yeah.
I love that you are still working with conservation here in the United States, and I think that points out to our the people that are listening is that conservation isn't only what happens in foreign countries, it happens right here in our communities, and you're a
Yeah.
part of that in your community. You mentioned something though that I think might the audience might not understand what it is. Can you tell us what mist netting is?
Oh, mist netting is right. So you set up nets and where you know birding habitat is, and the birds will fly into the net, and you can sort of gently take them out and weigh them, and then put bands on and release them. So that's the piece of that was the introduction to fieldwork that I had as a freshman in college.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, some other parallels come to mind. When I was a sophomore in college, I did a project in my ethology class on preening, on bird preening, specifically in emus because they don't have any of the barbules, the little things that make their feathers stick together. Their feathers are really fluffy. And that work with that ethologist really turned my head and had me go the direction of animal behavior. And so then I became a keeper and at the Brookfield Zoo, and I cared for great apes and cared for all sorts of other non-human primates. And in 1985, I had the opportunity to do some work in Madagascar. And so I was doing observational work with lemurs in Madagascar. But in March of 1985, on my way back, I went to Rwanda. I really, really wanted to see the mountain gorillas. And there was no email at the time, so we had those little fold-up blue airmail letters. And I knew one of the researchers, David Watts, and he invited me to come and visit. And so I did. And this was March of 85, and I got to meet Diane Fossey, which was incredible. The primates had come to the Brookfield Zoo when I was there, and I was completely enamored. But then to meet Diane in March just blew me away. I got to meet Group 5 and Beethoven and Shinda at the time. And then her death in December of that year was profoundly affected me. I knew that I wanted to get back to Rwanda at some point. It just took me 25 years to get back there. Um, I also was really fortunate. During vet school, I went to a zoo veterinarians meeting, and I got to meet Dr. Jim Foster at that time too. So it just feels like my life has been this series of serendipitous happenings that led me all the way to Gorilla Doctors, which truly was a dream come true. I was a veterinarian at the Indianapolis Zoo, and I was clicking through the ads for my intern at the time, and I saw the Gorilla Doctors ad come up, and I called Mike Cranfield and said, I really want to apply for this job. And then the dream of a lifetime came through, and I got to work with Gorilla Doctors. So and now I get to continue to work with this wonderful team through the board of directors. I'm just sometimes I have to pinch myself that I'm still involved with this fantastic organization.
I know it's amazing, and of course, a couple of weeks ago, we just sadly lost Dr. Galdikas and Dr. Goodall earlier recently as well. And you know, I think that those three had such a massive impact on young people who are interested in primates and in conservation. And yeah, there's big shoes to fill there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Trimates, you mentioned them earlier, that those three strong women that were hired by Louis Leakey, amazing leaders in great ape conservation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You also studied chimpanzees. So have studied all of the great apes, which is crazy. But you studied chimpanzees in Kibale, and was that graduate school when you were there? Can you tell us a little bit about that research?
Yeah, well, there's one great ape I've never worked with, and that is bonobos. So But
Ah,
I feel so fortunate, right? So over my career, I've worked with orangutans, gorillas, and chimpanzees, and I just feel so fortunate to have had those experiences. But right, so in graduate school, I was starting my PhD and um, trying to figure out sort of you have to pick a question, like what questions are you interested in? And um, at the time, I was in my graduate program, I was working with a professor who started the Kibale Chimpanzee Project in Uganda, which is in Kibale National Park. And it's one of the longest running studies of wild chimpanzees. So it began in 1987. So not as long as Jane Goodall's site, but one of the longest running studies. And at the time when I was thinking about what my question is, a lot of the behavioral research in chimpanzees was focused on males and male competition and how males are competing for rank within their communities. And for good reason, because if any of you have been lucky enough to see chimps in the wild, males are loud and proud right out in front of you and definitely get a lot of attention. Um, and females, so chimpanzees live in what's called a fission fusion society. So they come together at fruiting trees and other food sources, and then they split up during the day and go off into smaller parties and then come together again. So the males often stick together, and the females often go off on their own or with their offspring. So a lot of the research had been focused on the males, but there was some pioneering work at the time coming out from Jane Goodall's site in Tanzania, starting to ask the question, well, females are probably competing with each other as well, but we don't know as much about them because they are quiet and they go off on their own. And so that was what I wanted to investigate at Kibale is how are chimpanzee females competing with one another and what are they competing over? Um, and so through my research and collaborations, I was able to yeah, study the chimps there and find out really interesting things like even in a given fruiting tree, some of the fruit in the top of the tree is better than in the bottom of the tree. And the females that are higher ranking get the best spots within the tree. And also in the home range, there are parts of the home range that are higher quality than other parts, and the higher ranking females tend to get those parts of the home range. And over over time, what that adds up to is higher reproductive success for the higher ranking females. So it was super fun doing that research. And then I also spent a lot of time with the mothers and their offspring in those smaller, quieter parties. And so I got to observe the juveniles a lot, which if you've ever seen apes in the wild, juveniles are super fun because they're full of energy and mischief. And one of the things that I was curious about is I saw the chimpanzee youngsters would carry sticks around. So sticks about that long, about, that thick, they would find sticks like that and they would put them under their arm, put them here. They would carry them, I mean, they carry them around however they could, and sometimes even balancing them on their back. And so I was like, why are they doing this? That was something I was super curious about. And I worked with my PhD advisor and we looked at sort of decades of worth of data and put it all together. And we published a paper showing that that was indicative of doll play in non-humans. So the youngsters were picking up sticks and playing with them like they were dolls. So lots of really fascinating stuff from my time with the chimps.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I hadn't heard that. I'm going to have to look up that paper.
Well, one of the hardest part about studying chimps, though, and I wrote about this in the blog series, was around 30% of the chimps that I was studying at the time had lasting injuries from snares. So if you follow gorilla doctors, you probably know what snares are because that's one of the main things that gorilla doctors is called out into the forest to help with is when gorillas get caught in snares. So people were illegally setting snares in the national park, not to catch chimps, or it's not to catch gorillas, but usually smaller animals like smaller antelope that are then used for food or sold for food. And when chimps and gorillas get caught in the snares, they often can pull the snare out, but then the snare gets tightens on their hands and feet. and can have debilitating injuries for the apes. And I shared one of the photos that was from the Kibale Chimpanzee Project of Max, who was a chimp who got not one, but two different cases of being snared on his feet and ended up losing both of those feet. So as you can imagine, a very difficult existence as a chimp when you don't have your back feet. So it was hard to see that, and around 30% of the population had that, and so I was doing my interesting behavior stuff, but also really feeling like, how can I get involved in figuring out a solution? Because it wasn't sitting well with me just to see all this suffering and not doing anything about it. And the Kibale Chimpanzee Project had started an anti snare patrol, so sending teams out into the field to pick up snares so that they would be less of a risk to chimps. And so I got involved in with a Ugandan colleague, sort of co-managing that project for a while. And that was sort of the path that led me into conservation full time.
Oh, that's great. And the other piece of that that I know you're very involved with is that you can't just go in and remove snares. That's something you certainly can do, but it's the community aspect. And I know that
Yes.
as we start to talk about Grace a little bit more and all of the work that Gorilla Doctors does, it's so important to make sure that the communities understand the implications of the snares that they're setting and giving communities other alternatives for the food on their table for making money.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did with that project is we had the snare teams that were going around and picking up the snares go into the local schools and talk to kids about the work that they were doing. And one result from that is kids not only sort of understood better what the problem was and how their families need to contribute to the solution, but also kids became like, I want to do that. I want to be a ranger. I want to help pick up snares so that chimps don't get hurt. So it was also a chance for um, local kids to be inspired by the conservation work that was happening in the park.
So you got involved in this conservation work toward the end of your PhD. Did you have an idea that that was really going to kind of change the trajectory of your career toward conservation?
I don't know that I really buy into like straight line trajectories. As you can see in my career, I've looped back a couple times to different things, and so I don't know that I ever thought about it that way. But I just knew that I really enjoyed the work and wanted to be part of it, and I've kept doing it. So yeah.
I love that. And then ultimately, all of this led you to Grace and becoming the first executive director in 2013. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so at the time I was teaching, I was a professor in the biology and anthropology department. And so that was my full-time job. My full-time job was teaching. And on the side, I would do all the conservation work. And so I started thinking about I would really like to make a transition to working full-time in conservation, but the opportunity really wasn't there. And also all the conservation work I was doing, I was volunteering. So it was just stuff that I felt strongly about and would do in my spare time. And then once I started thinking about it, one night I just saw the advertisement for Grace that was, I think, on the AZA, the Zoological Association website. And they were looking for their first executive director. And at the time, the project, I knew a little bit about the project just because of my past work with Disney's Animal Kingdom. And Disney's Animal Kingdom was very involved in the founding of Grace along with the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund. And so I knew a little bit about it, but not that much. But I decided just to take a leap, and the application was actually due that day. So I stayed up till midnight and put in the application, and and it worked out. Yeah. So yeah, so Grace is the only sanctuary in the world for Growers gorillas, which are critically endangered eastern gorillas that Gorilla Doctors works with along with mountain gorillas. And yeah, it's the only place in the world where orphan growers gorillas can go. And from the very beginning, that project was focused on the eventual rewilding of those gorillas. So having the opportunity for some of those individuals to go back to the wild. So from the very beginning, we tried to manage it in as natural way as possible. So minimizing human interaction with the gorillas and having them forage for their own food in large forest enclosures. And if some of you have maybe been following the story, that last year, um, Grace reached sort of a major milestone, and four of the females from Grace were reintroduced back into the wild in Virunga National Park at the Mount Chaburimu site. So it's been such a journey, and I was there for the beginning, and my job was really to build that organization from the ground up. And it was my first time as an executive director, so I learned everything on the job. And really, the success of that project is dependent upon the hardworking team in Congo, the communities that partnered from the very beginning with that project, and then our international advisors and supporters that really made that project all come together. And they continue to do amazing things in terms of conserving wild spaces for great apes around the Grace area, and then the rewilding event that happened last year. So it's just been a thrill watching the organization continue to thrive and grow, and so proud of all of them. Yeah.
When I heard about those four females being reintroduced, and I saw the video of them walking out into the
I
forest
know.
back there, I mean, it still gives me chills when I think about that because Eddie and I, as we mentioned earlier, more Eddie than me, but we've had so many adventures together, Dr. Eddie and I, and you. We confiscated some of those gorillas. I remember them when they were babies. I remember bringing them to Grace. They're just, and to know that they are now wild gorillas, it is truly full circle. It is truly the epitome of what a conservation organization does, is rewilding these animals into a safe place where they can be gorillas again. Yeah, it gives
Yeah,
me
and
chills.
it does give me chills too, and it's not going to be possible for every orphan gorilla. And that's just the reality of it. But this case really shows when the right conditions are there, how everything can come together and work out for the gorillas. And yeah, it's just a beautiful story, and yeah, an amazing conservation journey.
Yeah, and I just want to sort of back up to something that I said earlier. All of these gorillas that are cared for at Grace were illegally taken from their families, and so and somehow through the grapevine it got back to ICCN that these animals were illegally taken from their families, and probably saw a parent killed in order to get the baby
Yeah.
around from the family. And Gorilla Doctors was always involved in the confiscations of these animals. So when we learned, when ICCN, which is the wildlife organization in Congo, learned that there could be an illegally captured baby gorilla, Gorilla Doctors would be on hand to help those babies because not only were they sometimes physically traumatized, they were really emotionally traumatized. So Dr. Eddie and his team have been in on going to confiscate, get those baby gorillas out of that bad situation, care for them for months until we regain their trust. And then eventually, they were in a different situation until Grace came along. And then when Grace came along, we were able to transport them to Grace. And so these were the lucky ones. These are the lucky
Yeah.
babies that we found out about.
Yeah, and they're survivors. And actually, I'm not surprised that those four females are doing well in the wild because they've been through so much, and the resilience in the gorillas there is just incredible. And right, so Gorilla Doctors was Grace's closest partner on the ground. So in addition to, sharing intelligence and helping with the rescues, we would collaborate to airlift the gorillas from whatever situation they were in to Grace's remote location. And then Gorilla Doctors also partnered with the veterinary teams at Grace for preventative care, routine health checks for gorillas, and then also the rare emergency that would happen. So I remember many late night calls with you and Dr. Mike and Dr. Eddie on the phone when there were serious cases that we were dealing with. So I had the opportunity to work with the Gorilla Doctors through Grace, and it's just yeah, such an amazing opportunity to be back here and helping to lead the organization now.
So Sonia, I remember during your interview, you said you thought you were done being an executive director. You were done having that role, and that you were going to stick to consulting, except for one organization that if they were hiring.
I did say that because I think so I at the time I was transitioning out of my latest job, which was an executive director role. So I've had that executive director role a couple times now. And I think I said to my husband, I think I'm done being an ED. It's a super demanding, hard job. And I was thinking like, yeah, maybe I should keep going with the consulting stuff that I've been doing. But I did say to him, but if something ever came up at Gorilla Doctors, I'd really have to think about that. And I didn't know that Dr. Gilardi was planning to retire, and it all just came together perfectly.
Oh, and I love that you said that, and I could tell that it was so genuine during your interview. And I just really, really hope that you still feel that way after the first 6 months, because our teams are so happy to have you at the helm too.
And in Gorilla Doctors, I just feel so honored to be working for an organization that I've known for a long time and that I respect so much. That plus I've watched Gorilla Doctors grow over the years and have seen them become more impactful. And, just the opportunity to work, which I feel is like really the center of great ape conservation of what Gorilla Doctors is working on. I wanted to be part of that. And also, the people at Gorilla Doctors are amazing. I wanted to share a quick anecdote because this came up yesterday. We had an all staff call, and sometimes so I get briefings, summaries of the active cases that are happening out in the field, the gorilla cases that we're monitoring, and interventions that have happened. And I was assuming that this becomes routine after a while for our team and the vets. They see lots of cases. For me, it's all new, so I'm in awe of everything that I'm reading. But yesterday on the all staff call, it was shared that there was a recent gorilla death in Uganda, and from an illness. And rather than just noting it as, a case study, the team really took some minutes to share what they remember about that gorilla and how that, like, they remember, oh, it was the beginning of my career that I did the first health check on that gorilla, and that gorilla has, gotten better over time, and we've seen him through the years, and it just like emphasized to me that this team is just loves their work so much. And I think, yeah, it was a really beautiful moment yesterday when everyone was sharing about their memories of that specific gorilla.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'll tell you what, I adore this team. A piece of my heart still lives there with them, and I'm so glad that I can help in any way that I can in this role. I do have to say, Sonia, that in this first month, you have hit the ground not running, but at a flat out sprint. And it's just I can't wait to see what happens in the coming years. And I'm just going to echo what you said too. Gorilla Doctors has been on such a great growth trajectory, and the coming years are truly the next chapter. We're really well positioned now. We have a new regional laboratory. We have done and continue to do some wonderful capacity building with our teams, with you at the helm, and many other pieces falling into place. I just can't wait to see how Gorilla Doctors will continue to lead Eastern gorilla conservation to the next level. Despite serious challenges in the region, Gorilla Doctors will continue that work, and I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. And you forgot to mention the new headquarters we have in DRC. That Columbus Zoo sponsored. So really exciting to have that new facility, which as of the team reported, they spent their first like work week there. So yeah,
That's great.
yeah. So having that up and running and having, as you said, the regional laboratory is just incredible. So I do think Gorilla Doctors is at a really exciting chapter, and I'm really happy to be joining the team now. We already have a very ambitious strategic plan laid out for our science and veterinary work. And so I see myself as executive director. Really, my job is to be the conductor of the orchestra, really to make all the pieces work together. So the expertise that we have in the field and the systems that we need to make everything effective and efficient, that's sort of my work. And in ensuring that the team feels supported, because they have a very hard job. As you said, they're working in very difficult conditions. And so yeah, so it's my work to sort of pull that all together. And then we have a new strategic plan for the organization that we're going to be working on with the board. And so that's going to be really exciting to see that all come together and be a part of that.
And we also have a really strong partnership with the UC Davis Wildlife Health Center. You want to talk about that a little bit?
That's one of the things that drew me to Gorilla Doctors. It's really amazing. The top vet school in the country is one of our largest collaborators. So Gorilla Doctors is a relationship, is a partnership between the Mountain Gorilla Veterinary Project, which is our NGO, and the UC Davis Wildlife Health Center. And so UC Davis helps us in so many different ways. Just some examples are our lab in Rwanda is is the only regional lab that is there for to analyze the pathology samples coming in from the field. And so we have Dr. Linda Lowenstein, who is on Zoom calls with our team, looking at samples as they're coming in, so that we can, as soon as possible, identify what's going on with gorillas, so that we can respond. We have members of the UC Davis team who also help us. Right now, we have the Pandemic Fund grant, which is a very large initiative happening across the region that we're leading, and so helping us with operations and technical expertise for that grant is a big part of what UC Davis brings to the table. So that's a really amazing partnership, and I'm looking forward to working more with Davis going forward.
Yeah, it's an amazing partnership. And I also understand that you'll be heading to the region soon for the first time in your role as executive director.
Yes, in May. I can't wait. So I'll be meeting with the teams from each of our three countries, as well as meeting a lot of partners in the region. And that's one thing about Gorilla Doctors that I really, really value is we can't do our work in a vacuum. Everything that we do depends on partners, and partners also depend on us. So the work is really, truly collaborative. So I'm looking forward to not only spending time with the team, hopefully I get to go out in the field and see some of the work with gorillas as well. But really meeting with our partners and working on those partnerships and figuring out how we're going to move forward and into the next chapter for Gorilla Doctors.
Oh, that's great. Oh, so many exciting things coming ahead. And I know that Amy has been monitoring some of the questions, and so we have a little bit of time for some questions from the audience. So let's see if I can. Okay, we've got a question here from Carolyn in Tucson. Is following a similar career trajectory as the two of you, let's see, is following a similar career trajectory as the two of you a promising path for young people today? What advice do you have for young people today who want to do conservation like we've done? I'll let you go with that, Sonya.
And you can piggyback on it too. Absolutely. We need conservationists more than ever. So I always encourage any young person who's interested in this area to get involved. And you can start small. Working on bird projects in your local community, that stuff is there. And also just taking advantage of any opportunity that comes up. Volunteering at a local zoo led me to Borneo. So really taking advantages of those opportunities. And like I said, we need people, and great apes need people. So the more the merrier. So please, yes, get involved.
Agree 100%. And what I tell young people who want to get into this field is it's not, you're not going to just open a door and have a career in conservation. It takes perseverance. You've got to volunteer. You've got to go out and knock on doors, meet people, take those chances. At your university, find a professor that is doing something that you're interested in doing and go meet that professor and tell them that
Yeah.
you're interested. For young veterinarians that want to do conservation work, you've got to learn medicine first and then get started small. You can do local conservation, but it is absolutely follow your heart. But you got to, one of the things that I think is really important is to be patient and understand that it's going to take a lot of steps. Your trajectory from A to B is not necessarily going to be a straight line. As you can see from Sonya and I, they are very swirly lines that circle around and come back and then move on to the next thing. So yes, it is an option for young people today to do the same sorts of things that Sonya and I have done. From Calvin in Colorado Springs. Hi, Dr. Sonya. Will you be working and living in Davis?
Oh, that's a good question. So I currently am based in Maine, and have been so far working remotely, but yeah, but it's an open question. So we're going to see how this remote relationship goes. But yeah, I could potentially be moving to Davis. I'm actually going to Davis in a couple weeks to work with the team there, so I'll be there soon. But yeah, Davis has amazing weather in the winter compared to where I live, so there's something super attractive about that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. From Jason in Cincinnati. Hi, Dr. Sonya. What is the impact? What impact has the political situation in the U.S. had on conservation in general and gorillas specifically?
That's a really good question. Thank you for that. So I'm just starting to come up to speed with the grant situation that Gorilla Doctors has, and definitely the federal funding cuts that have happened over the past year have impacted our work. So we had a large grant that disappeared overnight. And so the good thing is we have such a strong community of supporters that our supporters have been able to step up, and we've been able to also find funding from um, others in the UK instead of the US. So yes, it's definitely affecting our work and affecting gorillas because it's affecting our work, but we're in a really good spot, and that's largely because of all of you and the community support that we have for our conservation work.
Yeah, yeah. In addition to grants, as you mentioned, we're funded privately by
Yes.
individual foundations and then those international grants. So yeah, thanks to everybody in the audience for everything you've done to support us. Let's see, from David, how do gorillas fit into the larger picture of biodiversity in the region?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, I think there are simple answers to that, like they disperse seeds and have a role in the ecosystem. Um, and I think in terms of our One Health approach that we take with Gorilla Doctors, that's a really important um, perspective to take because the health of gorillas and the health of people and the health of domestic animals are all interconnected. So if there are things that are affecting humans, it can spill over to apes. If there are diseases affecting apes, it can spill over to humans. And so gorilla doctors, in addition to, if there are medical emergencies that we're called out to help, with sick gorillas and snares and things like that, um, part of our strategy and what we do is also how do we take a bigger perspective with One Health and work on One Health initiatives in the region. So, for example, one of our important projects is our employee health program, which works with people who work in the park and making sure that they are healthy in order because they're coming into contact with gorillas, and then also working with our friends who run eco tours and gorilla trekking and making sure that the rules are being followed to keep gorillas safe from any diseases that could potentially come from humans who are out to see the gorillas as tourists. So the One Health piece of what we do is super important because of those similarities between humans and gorillas and the bigger picture of how um, One Health affects gorillas, humans, and all wildlife.
Absolutely. The other piece about gorillas and biodiversity is that they are, we used to use the term keystone species. So they are the
Mhm.
big species that everybody knows about. And if we can use gorillas to help people understand that we need to conserve that whole ecosystem, so many other plants and animals are saved because we're doing this with gorillas as the core of the conservation decisions that are made for that area.
Yeah, and so many people love gorillas, and gorillas are really important to the countries in which we work in terms of revenue. So much revenue comes into these countries because people like you want to have that experience and see gorillas. And so, gorillas, as another word for as an umbrella species, so many people care about gorillas, and by caring about gorillas and protecting gorillas and the habitat that gorillas use, you're also protecting the insects and the plants and the fungi and everything within that habitat, um, that needs protection too. So, in some ways, because gorillas are iconic and so easy to love, they really help all animals in the ecosystem.
We have a statement from Frankie to you, Sonya. I don't have any questions, but I think you're wonderful and can't wait to see how you lead gorilla doctors, your fellow Wildlife Health Center teammate.
Thanks, Frankie.
We have a question from Natalie in Mexico. What is the most beautiful thing you have observed about gorillas?
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting question. So I have thought about this because um, having been a chimpanzee researcher, when I started working at Grace, I thought, well, I can never love a species as much as I love chimps. And then I started working with gorillas, and chimps and gorillas are very different in terms of when you are working up close with them. And I guess what I love about gorillas is you don't necessarily know what's going on in their heads. So chimps wear their emotions like on their sleeve, right? So you know what's going on with chimps. They just kind of show their emotions. And gorillas are more quiet, and but there's a lot going on there. But they're sort of more gentle and deliberate with their behavior. And I don't know. I just always, they're more peaceful. And yeah, being around them is incredible. So if you ever make a bucket list, put going to see gorillas on your list. Also chimps, because that's an amazing experience. But the first time that I saw mountain gorillas in the wild, like anyone will tell you, the first time that you do that, it's, yeah, life-changing. Really, really incredible.
Yeah, I've seen people move to tears when they turn a corner in the forest and there's a gorilla sitting there. And it's just incredible. One of the most beautiful things I have observed, and I think this is true for many species, but I guess I've just seen it more in gorillas, is that gentle, love and the strength of the bond between the mother and the infant, even as they grow up. And so, you might have a 4-year-old that has really been depending on his mother and now has a new baby. And you can see the mom taking care of the baby, but still gently protecting that 3 to 4-year-old too. That bond is strong. And like I said, it's true in other mammals, but I guess I've seen it a little bit more in gorillas just due to the nature of my work.
Yeah, and at Grace, it was incredible too because we had, a little family of orphans, and all of them had been taken from the wild, so did not grow up with their families, but they were kind of a family in and of themselves. And you know, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen is when a new orphan would arrive at Grace, that family of orphans would accept that baby in, and we have a female at Grace named Pinga, who was the female who, when there were new babies coming in, she would want to mother that baby and immediately adopt it as her own. And truly incredible, really, really.
It really, truly is. Let's see, we have a question from Jill in Massachusetts. What can we do to make a difference in addition to financial support?
I mean, I think anyone who follows what Gorilla Doctors is doing and talks about it with their friends, all of that matters, right? So financial support is obviously always helpful and helps sustain the work, but if you care and are enjoying the stories and the information that you're getting from our work, share that and tell people about what we do. Um, and I think also, again, back to conservation is not always international. If you're interested in conservation, also see what you can do in your own backyard. Everyone can do conservation in their own yards, in their own communities, and not everyone can end up, working in Africa. But we're all friends. We're all one big family here. So the more that we share our work and bring people into the circle, I think the better.
Oh, totally agree. And kind of interesting that the astronauts that were on the far side of the moon described the Earth. And I think all the astronauts that have seen the Earth from space have said the same thing. It is one planet. And I think those of us that work in conservation really understand that. We all have to do our part everywhere. And so conservation in your own backyard will help just as much as the conservation that's being done around the world. And I think totally agree with you, Sonya, that for those of you that are listening in today, just tell your friends and family about Gorilla Doctors. You know, spread the word. We do such great work, and just have to get people to understand what we do for them to fall in love with us.
Yeah, and if you're in the region, come visit us too. We people come visit us, and even meet the gorilla doctors in person, in Rwanda and Uganda especially. So if that's of interest to you, you can find information on our website for how to make those arrangements. We would love it.
Let's see, we have a question from Michael. When the gorilla doctors have to do a medical intervention and they have to dart the patient, how do you ensure that other gorillas stay away? And by the way, Sonya, congrats on your new role.
Thanks. Well, I haven't been there for an intervention, so maybe Jan can answer that.
So yeah, it is. It's kind of interesting. We always have rangers with us who really know those gorillas, trackers and rangers. They know those gorillas very, very, very well. And so once the patient is darted, sometimes the silverback gets a little angry and he charges and screams, and it can feel a little bit dicey, but the veterinarians fall back, and the trackers and rangers who know those animals well move forward and just kind of move the gorillas out of the way, and they form a ring around the gorilla doctors who are working on the gorillas in the field, because the forest is our hospital. We don't take animals out of the forest. So they form a protective ring and keep the rest of the animals away, and so that we can do our work. And then once the work is completed and we give the shot to wake the baby up or the individual up, then we gradually move away. The trackers move away, and that individual goes back to the troop. Gorillas are amazing, 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 and so they can get mad and they can move toward us, but they also can be pushed away pretty gently and to allow us to do our work. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
Let's
and
see.
I hope there's no intervention needed when I'm there in May, but I would like to go out into the field with the teams to see a health check or something. But yeah, I think Gorilla Doctors is the expert at this now. So when there are cases like a silverback charging, nobody knows how to handle that better than our vets in the field. So I'm excited to see it in person, and thank you for that great question to get a sort of a piece of how it actually is during an intervention.
And if you go to the website, there are some videos where you can actually observe an intervention, parts of an intervention. So check out our website and you can see some old videos and blogs. We have one last question from Rain, it looks like. Have you observed a decrease in snare-related injuries in great apes since the beginning of removal patrols?
Yes. So we measure the inter-snare interval, so how much time goes between a chimp, for example, in a community being snared and then the next snare that happens. We've seen that at Kibale since the introduction of the snare removal project. And I know that just yesterday on the call, Dr. Eddy was talking about snare removal happening in the Makeno sector of Virunga. So these anti-snare projects are happening, for gorillas and chimps and throughout the region, and they do work. So it's, yeah, super important work that we will continue supporting as gorilla doctors.
I can't believe that we are almost out of time and we're going to have to wrap it up. Um, oh, wait. One more question. It just came in, hot off the press. From Sandra. I'm a big Gorilla Doctors fan. I cannot thank you enough for what you do. If you could name one thing we can do to help support conservation, what would that be?
Care.
Yes.
And it sounds like you already do. Care and keep following, keep being a friend of Gorilla Doctors. We need our community, and I've just been blown away by um, over the past month the people that I've met who've been part of this community in terms of board members, staff, supporters who not only are passionate about gorillas, but have been supporting and being part of this work for decades. And that's really, really special. And such a special community. This was an opportunity for you to get to know a little bit about me. But what I'm most excited about is to get to know all of you. And so any chance that I have to meet with the members of our community, I'm going to take it because I'm just super excited to hear about why you're part of this community, why you love gorillas, and what we're doing. We can talk about what we're doing together as gorilla doctors. So yeah, just so impressed with what Gorilla Doctors has built, and also want to give a shout out to Dr. Kirsten Gilardi, who retired as executive director, and I've been really lucky to overlap with her over the past month. And she's just an amazing leader and big shoes to fill. But really, really proud to be in this position, and I want to thank you all for the trust you're putting in me as I take on this new role.
And I think also stay tuned for our launch and something special that you'll learn about on Earth Day, right?
Yes, so April 22nd, there's going to be a special announcement. So please keep following us and stay tuned because you're going to be excited about the announcement and the rollout. So stay tuned, April 27th, 22nd, Earth Day.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you've learned a little bit more about Dr. Sonya and about Gorilla Doctors. And reach out to us through the website or on Facebook if you have other questions. And have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.